Hi everyone. So thank you all for being here to share your stories. Um, can we first start with everyone going around and introducing yourselves, your organizations, and tell us a little bit about how you know each other?
I def don't mind going first. Hi y'all, my name is Jesus Holguin. My pronouns are they or AJ or anything as long as there's not a negative intent. And I am a founding member of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. And these folks here are like not just my comrades, but have been like my friends, my mentors, my parents, my they have been all the folks that I need in community um in order to make me feel powerful. Some folks I've known since like my early teenage years, other folks I've known in my 20s. I'm now in my 30s. So it really says a lot about the time and how much these folks mean to me.
Thank you, Jesus. Julian, you're already off mute, so
I'll jump in because Jesus, you just moved my heart. Yeah, it's been a while. We've known each other for a while. My name is Julian. I use he or they pronouns. I am part of HIP and have been living and working in Providence for a while now. And know everyone on this call like through that work, but not just in the like political organizing kind of work, but in the like folks who have helped me come to learn what real community is really about. Like, it's not just we're just as likely to see each other with our kids hanging out at birthday parties or playing basketball or whatever the kids might be doing, Halloween, etc., as we are to see each other like at a protest or in a meeting or, shouting at some politician about how they're falling short. So it's been the full range of being in community with each other, and it's really beautiful to be here with you all.
Okay, Vatic, I guess I'll go. You looking at me. My name's Monica Huertas. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the executive director of the People's Port Authority. And well, there was no other question, right? It was just, yeah, I'm glad to be here today. And I hope y'all can learn something.
Cool. Thanks, Jesus, Julian, Monica. Vatic, he, him, his pronouns. I am the director of art facilitation for One Square World, but also a co-founding member of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. And just like everybody said on the call, I'm like excited to be here with comrades that I've been, in this battle with for like a decade or so at this point, doing this work. So I'm excited to do some reflection and some visioning.
thank you all. And I'm Samia, she, her pronouns, and I work with Julian on the bridging team. I've had the honor of meeting some of you, Fadik in particular. And I'm just glad to be here helping to guide this conversation. Um, okay. So I think we're ready to kind of jump in. Most people watching or listening to this won't know about your community in Providence or your work around environmental justice and climate justice. So can y'all describe the big picture of the issues you've been dealing with, how you work together, and what you're trying to achieve?
I think I could give a brief like overview of what the heck we've been doing for the last decade. I can't believe it's been a decade. I really can't. When y'all said that, I was like, what the hell? But basically, some of the major things started happening around a specific project that wanted to a specific liquefied natural gas facility that wanted that the electric company wanted to build here in our city. And there was some organizing already being done in the community by Julian and Jesus and others. But a lot of us hasn't really looked at the port. The port of Providence is a tiny port, as like a big environmental issue until this proposal for the liquefied natural gas facility. At least I wasn't. I didn't even know the port existed, and I had been here 30 years. And so we started around stopping the construction of a liquefied natural gas facility, and then that quickly like snowballed, because I realized that it wasn't just liquefied natural gas, but it was like liquefied propane gas and tar and cement and all of these bottom of the barrel liquids and contaminants that were in our port. And so that's when we really started kind of just organizing around that. And for the first time, we started organizing committee meetings, community meetings, and we were able to kind of start thinking about it and getting other people to think about it as like this big issue, right? Thinking about the port and environmental health and environmental justice at the port. And that was 10 years ago. And like I said, it just quickly, we were like putting fires out in LNG and then LPG and then scrap metal and tar. And so that's how I met all of y'all back when. I think I was pregnant with Joshua, who's gonna be 9 years old. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll just add because during that time the LNG campaign was like $80 million out of taxpayer dollars. And yeah, I was at EJ League at the time, and it was exactly what Monica said. They proposed this one project, we heard of it, we did some research, and then saw that it wasn't just that one project. It was a bunch of little projects that was one project leading into the road, leading into the next facility. And we were like, oh, so we started being aware of like everything that was at the port. And now we're like, we were fighting about this and now we're mad about this. And now and so it was the start to just like that awareness of like what's living at our port.
Yeah, and like adding and thinking back to those like the EJ League days, and like right before that kind of facility campaign had popped up, we had been doing a lot of like the organizing from that organization had been involved in before that was around like brownfield contaminated sites that schools have been built right on top of. And so like kind of issues around like, this is a really polluted city, like the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution was right here, like the oldest of the old, long-standing toxic stuff that kind of grew out of, the port originally was created, as part of the transatlantic slave trade. And so like we were doing a lot of like youth education and organizing around environmental racism and where, the roots of it, where it came from. A lot of the folks, especially the youth who were part of it, had asthma. And so asthma was an issue. So we were talking about diesel trucks and air pollution. But most of the campaigns we had at that point were around these kind of like brownfield contamination cleanup sites in schools and education, youth work. And then we heard about this kind of like new proposal and we're like, whoa, what's going on here? And there's like, that entire area is contaminated as hell. And so we have to like, connect, it's like, we didn't have the language at that point of like, cumulative impacts, but that's what we were talking about is like, it's not just this one thing, it's all of the other things that are here too. And then trying to make the case. And we had it was a federal permitting things that we were dealing with, like federal agencies, and then there was like state agency permits, and we were also like having to learn about the government structure and how there's like city, state, federal, all these different agencies, all these different permitting processes. Like that was all like none of us individually had been part of those kinds of like permitting campaigns before. And then for me personally, like right after that kind of campaign was kicking off and we were doing organizing and education around it, I kind of made the switch from being at the EJ League to getting a job as the asthma program manager at the Department of Health. And so kind of like transitioned to this inside role. And at that point, didn't know anything about public health and what public health was. But I was like, wait a minute, like I come from this world of environmental justice, they're talking about social determinants of health and how all these kind of structures in society of how things are built affect health. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's what the EJ folks are talking about. Like, there's a place for this here, but yet the folks in the health department are paying attention to this major issue and campaign and aren't talking about it. Like, they need to do something about it. So it started to be basically like be an organizer on the inside of the health department, being like, asthma is the connection point that we can talk about all these other things, but we have to like push these professionals who are doing other things to like think about other pieces of it too. So it was a weird process to kind of go to be on the inside suddenly, and you know, whether or not to even take that job, like I had to really, I sat with that. I'm like, is this what selling out feels like? I don't know. Like, you know, I was torn on it, and had to get convinced by some movement elders, be like, no, we need people on the inside too. And so that was like the start of my insider path for, you know, a good 8 years of this journey.
Vadik, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I don't come into the story yet. My part of the
Oh,
story comes in a little bit later.
You know
do
what's
you,
funny? Something I was thinking about was you were saying that, Julian, is like it's crazy how the universe puts us in these places, because at the same time that this was going on with the LNG facility, the baby I was pregnant with a year after was poisoned by lead, had high levels of lead in their bloodstream, and they were breastfed. My third child was hospitalized 7 times in the hospital, twice in the pediatric intensive care unit. And I'm just like, universe, do I need more examples of EJ? Like, you know, like, do I need more examples? But it's so funny because it's just like the universe is that just started to like, and I became more aware of all the issues, hyper aware. Because I was like, why am I kid getting asthma? Why am I getting asthma? My kid is poisoned with lead, and that's when it really kicked in for me.
thank you all for setting that stage. We're gonna pivot to talk about inside outside strategy, but I want to like name that y'all have already begun talking about what this looks like in practice. The fact that there was something happening and y'all already had like this kind of like environmental justice community culture already existing to respond. And then Julian transitioned to the inside, and then Monica, you like contextualizing all of this, like the real life implications of what was happening feels really, really important. I'm just gonna explicitly name what inside outside strategy is, and then we're gonna shift into some questions. We know that it can be, okay. We want to hear about your experience of what we call inside outside strategy. It can be challenging to have productive collaborations between government agencies like health department and community power building organizations. Julian just talked a little bit about his personal struggle with this, and which are a part of social justice movements that often approach government as the target of your community organizing. And we talk about inside outside strategy as the intentional alignment and coordination between people inside of government and community power building organizations on the outside, working in partnership to achieve a common aim. It involves each side using their relative power, voice, and resource to create the policy and system changes called by the community. It can take a lot of different forms in different places and can change over time. Now let's dive into talking about what it's been like for you. So we want to hear you all kind of like talk a little bit more about your leadership, specifically what it's meant to you. What roles or positions have you been in to leverage and shift power, specifically in the context of the story that y'all are talking about? And have you had support from people in other positions of power? So generally, what was your role? How did you express leadership, support, and all that jazz? So if anyone feels called to kick us off.
With jazz, Jesus, you gonna jump in, and I'll go in after you.
Okay. I think something that comes to mind initially is like at the founding of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. The idea of equal municipalities came up, right, and that's just where like either government, community organizations, or community uplift that they would like their city to adopt 4 principles around sustainability, keeping it in the ground, and diversifying the environment and the city. The city had came to EJ League as a community partner to say like, hey, we want to start this eco municipality. EJ League was a little iffy. It was like, it sounds like a good
Jesus, can I pause you? Can you
Sure.
just, what was EJ League? Was it like,
EJ League was the Environmental Justice. Oh, EJ League, the Environmental Justice League of Rhode Island. It is the place where a lot of us met. It is an organization that no longer exists. It was where like I got my foundational everything from like my environmental work to my social justice work. Helped me develop an analysis, right? And we had like a bunch of young folks that would come through this. And so what I would say is like when Julian had left, it was predominantly young folks in the space holding it. Little iffy, another conversation. But we were the ones that like in that space we heard news of the what's it called? The not liquefied natural gas facility. And we were the ones that started organizing around it. Like it was just like young folks being like, we need to stop this. Let's give it a cute name. And now we have a campaign. And Monica was the one that took that and brought and like gave it life actually. And and so that was EJ League. And so the Environmental Justice League was already a pillar in community with community. Like that's how it was founded around the brown sites. How Julian had talked about it earlier. And so when the city had first came to EJ League to start this, we was like, oh, this sounds great. They wanted us to do recruitment to bring in other community members. In the conversation with other community members, they were like, no, I'm not working with the city. Like straight out, just like that. No, I'm not working with the city. I'm not being pacified. I'm not like my work that I do is more important that I be on the streets than meeting with the city because and they had all the reasons. They were like they don't respect us, they don't they don't listen to the things that we say, like we're experts in what we believe, and like folks are not listening to us. And so like these are my elders, right? Like these are the folks who are my mentors being like um, and I'm all young, bright-eyed, like, let's do this, we're gonna change the world, like everything's great. But they've already had their incidences where they've been co-opted by the city and then pacified, and then they felt like they let their work go. And they could have done more on the streets. And I think so, like that's one of the first things that came up. When you talk about the inside outside strategy was like that folks didn't even want to be there. Because they know the harm that the city causes and what it is to be in that machine. And then I feel like once the thing that got us there, that got us to folks being able to be into the space, were our acknowledgements and like the acknowledgements that the folks with like the municipal power had to that part. They wanted to what are they saying? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
we're talking about acknowledgements.
Oh yeah, so acknowledgements was the thing that allowed us to get into the space together, and the acknowledgements were really that the municipal workers had to acknowledge the harm that the city has caused historically, and continues to cause till this day. And those acknowledgements were like acknowledging that slavery happened, acknowledging that this is the land of indigenous people, and we're on it. um Understanding that like city processes are hard to navigate, right? Like if you could not understand these questions, we were like, we do not want to be in this space, because we would be doing a lot more teaching than getting to the work that we're actually already doing on the street. And then I think I'll leave it there. yeah, I think I'll leave it there. And then if anything comes up, I'll bring it back.
Cool, thanks, Jesus. Yeah, and so yeah, I come into the picture around this application process for the Racial Environmental Justice Committee, which was set up by the Sustainability Office of Sustainability, and the Environmental Justice League was a partner. I think at the beginning also Groundworks Rhode Island was a partner. And the way that they had it structured, they brought us all into City Hall and like kind of just like explained to us in the most general sense. And then they were like, okay, there's application process, and they had like 10 different seats. And so it was like seats for different parts of the city, and then there were different areas. So there's like education area, there was like racial justice area, and then I think I was selected for the racial justice area or something like that. But like the way I stumbled into that room is I was arrested at a protest, and then I was brought into community by organization here, Prism, Providence Youth Movement, as youth student movement, and they had an attorney who like supported me and like helped me get out of jail and all these other things. And then from there, I kind of was in movement. And then when that email came out to like be involved in this, that was something that I applied to, but I didn't apply to it until I had a conversation with folks. So like, because I heard some of the stuff that Jesus was talking about, like where people were just like really they were just like, they weren't sure of the city. They weren't sure. They had situations, like Jesus has said, where they had been co-opted and things had gone wrong for them in the past. And so I just like checked in. I was like, hey, why isn't anybody from Prism going to be a part of this? Or why isn't anybody from Dare going to be a part of this? And, folks told me the story, and I was like, well, should I still be involved in it? And folks were like, yeah, I mean, it could be all right, but we just as an organization aren't going to be involved in it. So people were giving us a heads up of what was in front of us. And so like in my position as being a community member, and at the time I was working in education, I came into the space and I was being educated by the people here. So like Jesus is coming in and talking and sharing about eco municipalities. Monica is coming in and sharing her expertise and just like dropping all of that information in there. And then, there were times when I would, connect with Julian around his work around asthma and the work that he was doing. And I would bring him in to talk to my young people. And so there was a way in how, I was inside of this academy, you know what I'm saying? Like this environmental academy of real world things. And then it was connecting me to like my real life lived experience of like a person who's like growing up suffering from asthma. And like, I always thought it was just a family thing, right? But then to come to find out, I grew up with a gas stove in my house, you know what I'm saying? I have all of these different things, you know what I'm saying? Like living near highways, all these different things that are causing the health thing. But like in my mind, it was like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my blood and my genetics. But in actuality, there's something in the environment. And so, I came onto the seat in like that racial justice seat. And so it was really clear to me that, environmental justice and racial justice were so entwined. And, going through this process really helped refine and gave me that foundation for the work that I'm doing.
I think at this piece, I was on a bit of a parallel track, so there's all this kind of work going on in community. At this point, I was at the Department of Health. And so I like a lot of where I was at was like learning how government works and trying to see what I could do to push the system from the inside. And then there's this ongoing campaign going that I've been part of at the beginning as an organizer, but having to go through some of my own learning and like building my own leadership to know that like it is no longer like I cannot be in that like organizer kind of role. And so I had a couple moments where there was like, there's like the city level politics going on with the city trying to kind of, look at its like 10-year sustainability plan and be like, oh, there's no equity in this. Where do we build equity into this plan? And all these kind of conversations in community happening that led towards the Racial Environmental Justice Committee being formed. Meanwhile, there's this campaign going on around the LNG facility, which is like a primarily a federal and then a state thing. And so like I would, during my day job, be talking to people at work around environmental health, environmental justice, asthma, how it connects, how the department needs to weigh in on this. This is an issue that affects health. We're talking about health equity. We need to kind of take a stance on this. And then working to build a relationship, we had a new director coming in at that point, Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott, first Black woman to lead the agency, first one person to really put equity front and center as what the Department of Health was about. And so like making those cases internally. And then, an evening, the kind of campaign was going on. I was no longer at my role at the Environmental Justice League, but still involved, as a resident of the neighborhood where this thing was being built, and a few blocks down from where Monica lives. And so would show up, with my family, like my partner, our kids would, we're little at this point. And so we'd be in these spaces. And so when it came to like, the part of the process that there was like a permit application that the environmental agency at the state needed to have around toxic soil, like I would show up and testify. It's outside of work hours. So I'm like, I can tell them what I think and I can say that this is wrong and you shouldn't do it. And then the next, later that week or the next day, I'd be in a meeting in the director's office conference room around health impacts and environment and would hear about it. And they'd be like, why were you there? What were you doing? I'm like, but it was outside of work. It doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't matter. Like your work hat follows you wherever you go. You are the government now. Those are your colleagues in the environmental agency. You can't talk to them like that. I'm like, well, what the hell? Like they need to do the right thing. Are we about it? Are we not about it? And so like, I got myself in trouble. I had my wrist slapped. I had to like learn how to play the part and play the role in a very different kind of way. And so that was like my kind of like leadership journey at that point of like, what can I do from the inside and what can I get the system to do to kind of put its walk where its talk is, in a way that can leverage power in a very different way. So I could like think of it like an organizer, but it was a very different role to be in. And then I'll pass it to you, Monica, to kind of talk about your journey in this process of like from that campaign and onward.
Yeah, I think so. The campaign started, everything was happening when my kids were sick. So because my kids are sick, I wasn't working, and like I had all my life like just like I had my son at 17, right? And so like I always wanted to like go to school, finish college because I wanted that for myself. And after I did all that and I became a social worker, I couldn't even work because my kids was always in the hospital. And so when we were starting the committee, the REJC, Racial Environmental Justice Committee, which that wasn't even the name of it at the point, but there was like no name, like we had no name. And I lugged to the city hall, which was funny because they made us apply and then I applied and then they denied my application, but I went to city hall anyways. Yeah, I went to city hall anyways with my kid, and my fourth child was 6 months, Joshua. Well, less than 6 months. There's pictures of him like running around like in city hall, like right there. He couldn't even walk at this time yet. But so all of this started to happen, and then we didn't have a committee, and so all the things, and I felt like really this was a good way for me to build capacity to do these, because we would get our little stipends and stuff like that to build capacity so that I can do other work, the other unpaid work of everything, right? Of like being a mother of 4, but also of the work of the stopping the facility. And so as time went on, and we became a little bit more official, I started working with them in like an official capacity. And I would have to say that working in that kind of like inside out, for me personally at the time was really, I struggled a lot. And I don't think I could have done it unless I had already built the relationships that I had built already, because you're like working for like the monster that you're like fighting, right? Like, so it would be like, I'm over here. I'll never forget one of the things what we did as a strategy was we went to read like a demand to like one of the heads of Department of Environmental Management, Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, Terry Gray. And I'm like with one of my kids here in the little thing, and one kid here, and then we have banners and stuff, and I'm like reading this to him because I'm telling him how difficult it is and like the impacts in my life, and for him not to permit, I think it was like an air permit. And then less than a year after that, we're working with him. We're working with him and other leaders And so I really struggled because I was like, what the fuck? Like, why do I have to sit here with that? Like, Terry, I had to go to your office with my 2 children and tell you this, this, and that, right? And so I really struggled with like, oh, here's this guy, right? Specifically him. Him, and we had a bunch of other regulators that we had to work with. But again, what helped me was that I trusted the folks that I was working with, Vatic, Jesus, and other community members at that time. But then also, I knew that this was really the only way because I was really sick of being like, and this is me personally, I was just sick of being like that angry person all the time. Like I wanted to find a real solution. Like, yes, that works. That anger is what I used and I'm gonna still use it. But I was sick of always just being crushed. And I knew that it wasn't something I was doing because I was like, that's valid. But I knew that these motherfuckers wouldn't care about that. Like they wouldn't care. Like I could talk about my kids all the time and humanize my children, but they wouldn't care. And so this was really the crash that I was like, okay, let me just like try to do this. And it was hard because at this point it was like COVID. We was like in the COVID. So it was really hard to do that, but it was like a big shift. But then now, years later, I can call Terry because he did the process and he was committed to doing the process with us. And I was committed as well. And then now I'm like, oh, they're gonna listen. Watch. You just watch. Right. And so we haven't had big examples. I haven't had big examples of something that he was like, but I know that he like championed, but I know that he could potentially when the time comes because we already did that work with them. And if he don't, I know how to find him. No.
We know where you at, Terry. I think I just want to add on to both what Julian and Monica said. Just as I think of like some of the challenges at the beginning, as we were getting this started, it was this idea that like the regulators did not know how much power they hold. Right. I feel like Julian was a really good example as someone who was working in the space. So like, what can I do? I'm gonna do it all. Okay, I got in trouble. I gotta right and see how much I can right and really push the limits of what their power can do in that municipal space. When we were meeting with a lot of these folks, we'll meet with the Terrys, right? At the beginning of us meeting with these folks, they're like, what do you want us to do? Like, we don't have the power. Like, you're the director of this space. Or the folks that we would get would not be directors of their departments. But they'll be like, this is so important, but my director doesn't think it's important. And they feel powerless in the space of talking about it. But also, parallel to that, your director might not care, but you personally get to speak to the mayor every week, right? You are able to influence the mayor, right? And so a lot of it at the beginning was this like, you have power. like we have people power, but you have power.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was a mixture of that, like building that relationship. And so just to like, add on, there's a trajectory. So we did our relationship building with our group of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee. And at the time, there were 5 city directors who were part of REJC, and then we met with them once a month. And then each of us as members of REJC, we had our own base that we were meeting with, 10 members, and we were talking with them. And then that's how we developed the Just Providence framework. And then from that Just Providence framework, worked with the city to develop the Climate Justice Action Plan. And then as a piece of that Climate Justice Action Plan, there was green justice zones. And so from that, we developed a similar type of like model where we had community members from South Providence and Olneyville working with regulators from DEM, EPA, the health department, and bringing folks together to talk about what does green justice zones look like in Rhode Island. And so like that is a trajectory, you know what I'm saying? Like there were several projects that led to us being able to have trust, have relationships. And it's like, I think there's something valuable about us having a stable relationship where you can call someone out and you could talk to them, you know what I'm saying? Like in a stern way, but it's like, there's a foundation and there's like some sort of something holding there, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a multitude of us holding things. So like if Monica cannot hold it, like cannot be cordial with the person in the meeting and Monica has to step out or Monica needs to let off steam, then it's me or Jesus, we're there. we can talk with you, Terry. We can have a conversation and say the same thing that Monica's saying, but maybe saying it in a different way. And then there's a way in how Monica being so real and like having the forethought and saying what needs to be said scares the shit out of them, right? So it's like, okay, if you don't talk with me and Jesus right now, then Monica, you know what I'm saying? Monica's gonna come back in, you know what I'm saying? And so like there is a way in how we are working together. And then there are also times when it's like it is not fair for Monica to always have to use that energy. So when is it that you, Vatic, are gonna come in and step up and like say the things that need to be said? And so that is like those are the ways in how like our relationships were valuable, but then there's also ways in how like it can burn you out. You know what I'm saying? Like it's really hard, intense work to like go in and tell people who have power that they have power, right? And so like it is, yeah, it's just like a longer frame of things. And we're talking about this in a 10-year trajectory. And I just want to like let people know that it's like, you know, one of our ways of being. So like that's another thing that I think was valuable for us was we had ways of being, but it was like there's no quick fix, right? So it's like every time we're having a meeting, like we know there's no quick fix. We know that we're in the long haul, we're struggling together in this work. And so it's not just ways of beings that we had for our meetings, but it was a way of us, you know, organizing together and like how we live through that.
Oh, thank you all so much for that context. I have just a few clarifying questions, and we don't have to hear for everyone. Just want to make sure there was some loose threads that I feel are important to tie up, and then we're gonna actually shift into talking about the political landscape. I think first I just want to acknowledge that you all kind of touched on how the relationships that you built with each other, with your community, like that gave you the capacity needed to continue pushing through and seeing this work like continue, right? Like the relationships y'all have with each other at moments where, Monica, you expressed it, like you were feeling down, you have 4 kids, but it's the relationship you have with these folks here that made it so y'all can continue working together in all the different roles that you were playing. So I think that's really important. And if anyone wants to keep speaking to that, please do. I want to first ask 2 clarifying questions. The initial catalyst for this 10-year journey that y'all were on had to do with the port of Providence. And so just want to clarify what happened with that campaign. I'm hearing that over the 10 years, it has branched out into so many different campaigns and initiatives, but the specific demand y'all had at that time, did it get met, or what happened there? And then second, y'all spoke about how initially community was not in support of working with government. Like that was a big hurdle that y'all had to overcome. And I wanted to know whether the REJC, after the city acknowledged all the legacies of harm, was that a direct response or like something that was created to help foster relationships, or was the REJC created for a specific purpose outside of this tension y'all were navigating? So if anyone can speak to those 2 questions, please, and then we'll move on to
jump
political
in
landscape.
really quick about the campaign. So they wanted $80 million. They won. We stopped them for like 3 years. They did it 3 years later, and it cost them like double, probably. I don't remember the numbers, but it cost them a lot of more money. I drive by the site 4 times a day, and I see it, and it just kills me. But it was a huge victory in terms of how we organize and we mobilize people to have a voice for the first time. And I'll never forget, in one of our first hearings in downtown at the the CRMC hearing, Coastal Resource Management Council, right? I'm like, somebody testified that for the first time, they had been living here their whole lives, and there was an elder, and for the first time, they gave them an opportunity to speak on this, to say a yes or a no, to even just acknowledge that this is something that we could be a part of. And so that to me was a huge victory. And then, so they did build that initial facility, but years down the line, another company proposed a liquefied propane gas expansion, and we won that. Again, we're organizing. We already had created this huge voice around the port, and around the community of the port. And so then the AG's office and the city of Providence sent their lawyers to help us fight this, right? Because we had done that work and we showed them that don't mess with us, you know? And so that's how we won. And I just want to reiterate, yeah, the relationship building, that was not easy. That was the hardest thing. And now, all these years later, we can laugh about it and talk about it, but we cried. Like, I know I cried. We cried, we laughed, we like were depressed. Like, it was hard on us. And I'm so grateful that it did happen. And I wish that we could have that process in all the organizations that I'm involved with, really, because it does something to you that is at the fundamental like core of, it did it to me, like a fundamental core, like at my most humanistic self, to be in this process with folks. And it really moved me in that type of way and made us all better organizers, I think, because that's what it is, right? Because we could talk about lived experience and but at the end of the day, it's like, who are we doing it for? For us, for each other, for each other's kids.
One thing, another kind of piece to add to that of like how it's changed over time, like it was a devastating loss with the facility getting approved first by the state agencies and then by the federal agency. And then so much because of the organizing and because of the relationship building, so much has come out of it. So, you know, there was that one victory that Monica just mentioned with the propane facility that was just a couple of years ago got denied. There was another one, like this victory happened like right like at the moment that COVID was first hitting. But leading up to it, there was a construction and demolition debris waste transfer station that would have accepted all kinds of toxic material and shredded it and processed it. And it was like in the same area right across the highway from a school. And so in that one, like, you know, we got like the medical director of a health center weighing in opposing it, the principal of the school that had previously not even wanted to talk about air quality because they've got an elementary school for disabled children right next to the highway. And so they're like, we don't want to talk about air quality. And so like they weighed in to fight it. Like there was because of the community organizing, it was able to get institutional players, both like larger, you know, nonprofits, schools, health institutions, and some like pieces of government agencies to like weigh in support of what the community was calling for. And then like with that facility, like I was able to like get approval. Like, you know, I couldn't before I like tried testifying on things as myself individually, got in trouble for it. So for this one, it was hey, if you want to bring asthma data into this thing, like we've done this research now, we have this like detailed asthma hotspot maps that show that this very particular census tract community is the worst of the worst in terms of asthma in the whole state. And the state, you know, like I can back this up with data that like we're not just saying this, it's real, you know, like for those people who don't trust lived experience, like this is hard data. And so like I'm like, if you put a request in for the Department of Health to like comment on asthma data, then I can show up on behalf of the Department of Health with data, with the Department of Health logo on the top and testify at this hearing that this, you know, that there already is a problem, this will make it worse and it should not happen. And so that was such a shift and a difference of like how to be able to like mobilize my role on the inside in a different way. And it was happening, it was like not just, it was like across multiple different agencies. Like that was happening with the city and the sustainability department and getting them to kind of like support this work. It was the attorney general's office and getting them to like weigh in with their legal support. It was the state agencies. And it's really like shifted what that landscape looks like now. It's definitely not perfect. Like it's a, you know, it's not a linear, like things are getting better, but we're having much different conversations now. Like we're deep in on like getting the city to rewrite its 10-year comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance in a way that the debate we're having now is like which polluting industries should be banned, rather than like, is there even an issue to be talking about here? You know, like it's light years different and it's like still a battle, but it's a very different battle than it used to be.
Thank you, Julian, for leading us in this direction. Y'all have already began talking about the landscape and some of the various like folks who were a part of this process. There's no need to name any names, but can you all tell us a little bit more about like who are your allies and opponents on both the inside and the outside, right? Like all of the relationships that help sustain this work? And what were the dynamics y'all had to navigate? Monica, you began talking about how on the outside, it was really hard to do relationship building. Can we hear more about that? Like, how did y'all build the capacity? Who supported that work? And then also we can hear a little bit more about what that work looked like on the inside too. That would be great.
Did you ask Monica to start? Sorry.
Anyone can start.
So Monica, you don't want to start.
No, I talked enough.
Just to be clear.
Step up, step back.
Hold on. Let me, since we don't know who to play it. He's always an opponent's over time.
Also, vice talk.
Right. I think two things come to mind when I think of this question. I think kind of piggybacking off what Julian was just talking about in the change of like what it is to like have sorry. I think the oh, where am I?
I can go.
Hold on. Now I gotta get this thought out.
Okay, get it out, get it out.
I think one of the things that the culture change that I feel like is the biggest difference is that we have our work that we have done in the past 10 years, right? Like we have the Just Providence framework, and like that's the framework for a just and racially just and equitable Providence. Our climate justice plan, right? To hear that something got denied at the port because they was like, we can't do this. We have the climate justice plan. That right there is like, oh, we're in a step in the right direction. Because for the first time in the 10 years, we didn't have to go outside of this toxic industry, breathe in the toxic air to yell at them to be ignored, right? And like, and so that I feel like was like has been a really big I don't know, I guess help for us in just knowing that like we can always point out the work that we did and point out the acknowledgments that the city has taken and the things that folks have adopted into like our laws, right? And so like I think that that was a big help. And I think overall, and I think the most clearest one and like where we are today is the difference between like our mayors. And the mayor that we had when we were starting this, and now we have a new mayor. The mayor when we were starting this, Def wasn't like all in, but what was brought in by the folks that they were surrounded in, right? Like the 5 different directors that we had be a part of REJC was letting him know like it's important for you to be a part of this. And was able to show up in space in community for like undoing racism training and like 3 days of it. And like I'm really critical of the mayor and the spaces that he takes up. And when he comes to visit events, I'd be like, are you just here to show face or are you here to actually be in community? And you know, the first day I was like, oh, you're just showing face, you just wanted to come say hi, whatever. But then they came back the other 2 days and stood the time that we had asked for. And that to me was like, okay, you actually want to sit with us, you actually are know about these things and are thinking about these things. It's not a question of like, do they just not know? And I feel like those are the two changes. And like the capacity now of the mayor, like you said, we're gonna have to say nice things.
We don't have to say nice things. Some people don't need to have nice things said about them.
But that right, that says enough of like the yeah, it's just iffy now. It's just real iffy. Go
One
ahead.
thing I want to just jump in and say that we can do though, and it shows is like even with a new mayor who is not an ally and is very much an opponent, the city council is very different, you know, and like, you know, Monica, you ran for office, you didn't win that seat, but because you made it an issue, like we can push the current city councilor on that seat to like do the right thing most of the time. And we have a like, you know, and like when this new term came in, knowing that the new mayor was not going to be an ally, but knowing we had a much better city council, like we as the Sustainability Commission, which like grew out of that like previous city body, the first one that was like didn't even want to hear about the Just Providence framework and voted it down. And Monica, you were the one where you're like, we're going to replace every single one of you. And here we are today. Like, I'm the chair of the commission, Vadek's the vice chair, Jesus is there. We've got like multiple seats like for the REJC on this commission. We've got youth seats on this commission. And we can be this bully pulpit that like, even when we have a mayor who's trying to advance something that we are opposed to, like we can leverage that power to be able to push back against him and he can't be successful. Like the term started, we called them in to like, let's have a climate justice briefing with the head of city council and the head of the finance committee and the mayor and like, let it be known, like we will be working on this comprehensive plan and we will be working on the zoning ordinance and whether they like it or not, like they're going to fight it. It's still a battle, but like we are pushing them far more than like they don't have a choice to some extent because we're well organized.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did want to also like just thinking about like how we navigate these different things. And so like, yeah, to Jesus's point, Mayor Loiza did like show up at the the undoing racism trainings, and he was, you know, he was beneficial in some different parts, but like when we're doing this inside outside strategy, the thing about the inside is like they're holding the power. And they are only like when we are like creating this collaborative governance structure, decision-making structure, the only way that the structure has power is because the people who have the positional power are relinquishing it to the other folks that are in the space. And so I think one of the things that I've been learning is like, you know, we do have we have the Just Providence framework that we try to take to the city to like get them to approve it and be like, okay, we're gonna approve this or whatever, right? And like we went to the sustainability task force at the time, and they're like, you know, they're not like codifying or like setting anything to law. They could just accept it as their thing or whatever, right? Or like the climate justice plan. It's like, okay, this is the plan of sustainability, but sustainability is not even in the city charter, right? So like another mayor could come in and like get rid of that whole, you know what I'm saying, the whole office if they wanted to, right? So it's like people are pointing to it and giving it power because they want to give it power. And something that like dawned on me like midway through our process with REJC was the comp plan. It was like we kept doing all this other stuff, and it's like there's such a thing as a comp plan that is actually the law and that planning has to follow. It's like, what? You know what I'm saying? It was like, how do we do this? And like every time we would like talk to our city folks about it, like how do we get involved in this, how we do things, there was like a wall around it. It was like a wall around the actual thing that you can change, right? And so I feel like in this moment, there is this moment where we have power in a way that we haven't had or a community hasn't had in recent history or whatever. However, we were locked out of the process. There is a process that has been proven of how to engage with community and have community involved. And there's a way in how they pacified or they locked us out and haven't given us the same type of power that they gave us power on doing the climate plan, right? You know, maybe like, because Monica, I think you were like, you sat on one of the boards or something like that for the comp plan, or yeah. So it's like you're there and you're involved, but I don't know that it's the same, right? I don't know. I'll let you talk to that.
No, I'm not on the board for the comp. I don't think this was a specific board, but definitely there's one for the master plan. We're doing like a master plan for the port. But yeah, there's definitely like a fake show of like that we have power. But luckily we don't fall into that most days, you know, and I think that's what we always got to be conscious about. And I think that's when a lot of people that have organized before and then they're not organizers anymore, or they're like politicians now, they fall into that trap thinking that they got some kind of cute little power or whatever, or they're like, oh, they forget. And so yeah, I haven't forgot. Like I ain't got no power. All the power that I have is from the people, and I can be taken in a quick second. But little, you know, as my little executive director position, it doesn't belong to me; it belongs to the people. And so, I don't get confused, not 1 second about that. But it's
Can you
easy to
talk a
get
little bit about, can you talk a little bit about the $1 million? $1
the $1 million. Which one? The one
million
for the
that the $1 million that
yeah.
we were supposed to be, reallocating. Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, they're like, oh, we're gonna reallocate this money, but I guess that's because that's again back to Vadek's point of like it's not codified. It's just like these empty promises. And again, you can get real caught up into it, but like, yeah, that we're gonna give us $1 million out of this big money that they got, and the COVID money, and then the mayor's changed, and then boom, it disappeared, right? And it was like, oh, I don't know what y'all talking about, and it was for parks and stuff like that. Like, oh, we don't know. But again, it like, you know, I think we fell into it like, oh yeah, that's gonna happen. But there's no teeth. There's no, you know, the next mayor can do away with it. And they did. And so, but again, you just can't fall into that trap.
I hear you all kind of like naturally already answering this question, but can we talk about the lessons learned? Specifically, when we're thinking about building power and using inside-outside strategy, what have you learned and what would you advise others considering these approaches? Or lastly, what is something you realize now that you wish you realized back in the day or when you were starting this work? I'll drop the question in the chat.
Yeah, I'll just jump in first. Relationships, building like relationships with folks and like, getting to the human level. So like being on the human level with the people who are in the inside, but then also building like relationships and understanding with folks on the outside, not being co-opted by the inside. So like something that when we were at the beginning, we would only meet with inside folks with another outside person. So it's like we as community would not go into spaces alone. And then just like that was like a thing to like build trust. Another thing I would say is just like codify, like finding out the ways that you can get your work like into some sort of legal form that people will be bound to, and not, it could change when turnover happens, right? So like we went through a whole participatory process with community for like several months to talk about how to like spend $1 million in the south side of Providence and Onlyville. And then when turnover happened, like we had a lame duck mayor who was like was going out, and then they had a new like city planner or somebody came in and was like, I didn't hear anything about that money. We're taking this money and we're gonna, I don't know, buy garbage trucks or something. I don't know what they did with the money, but it was not connected to what community wanted, like the resiliency hubs and things like that community talked about and wanted, that the money wasn't used for that. So I would say that those are the 3 lessons that I will uplift.
I think one thing that I've been reflecting on a lot is just like what makes a victory and what to do. Like every step along the way has been a learning opportunity. And like even when it was some of like the biggest losses we've had, like we lost the battle after 3-4 years to fight to stop that LNG facility, but so much came out of that. And so like everything can be for learning and can build for the longer term struggle. And that part of that learning is also like getting to what Vadek was just saying of like understanding where you can codify it. And then like sometimes those victories, like they feel like you can't quite celebrate them because they're not like the full victory that we were hoping for. Like we got close, we could see what that could be, and then it gets like negotiated or pulled back. Like we stopped the kind of, during that lame duck term, we stopped the previous city council that was terrible from just like rapid passing through the 30-year lease extension for Provport, which is like the privatized portion of the port. We thought the new city council would be stronger at doing it, and they were but they didn't fully block it. They still ended up passing it, but they passed it with like stuff built in where there's like now like, money built in that is going to be going towards the Sustainability Commission to put towards local environmental justice priorities. There's like the banning of all fossil fuels for the next 30 years in that port. So like there's wins that can be celebrated along the way, and also like not getting tripped up that like this was a full victory and that there's not still more work to be done. Like it is always an ongoing process, and it's a lot of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step maybe to the side, turn around, move forward again, it's just like, it's a very like organic growth process, but it like, in looking back, we can see where the victories are and also see like how much more there is to be done.
For me, the biggest piece of advice is like, find your people. Don't do it by yourself. Don't think there's no easy fix. One of our things that we use of like our commitments to each other is like your growing edge. Mean like meaning like you're here to learn. And yeah, it's just a whole process with your people first. Like gather your people first and do it community and be in process with them and in relationship with them, and then everything else. And I understand how hard that is for people who do this as a job, right? Like, well, I don't understand how hard it is because I've never done that, but I think I could relate. I could try to understand how difficult it is because they're doing it from 9 to 5, right? And so there's like, okay, and they're doing it for like their tenure of or however long they're gonna be in that position. But I've seen examples of people who really care. Like the one we was working with, and she's not here today, but she should have been, Leah. I think it's just conflict with her schedule. But Leah, she did that, and we do not get along. We do not get along. We have this funky relationship, but she did that. I have to give her flowers. Like she did that. She put up with the bullshit that she didn't have to. You know what I'm saying? In the position she wanted to. She said she would. But really, it's like a 9 to 5, and it's like, okay, I'm not gonna deal with all that. I wouldn't have done that. I'm not dealing with these people. And in fact, people after her have not done that. Her predecessors have not done that work. And her predecessors of color have not done that work. And so anyway, so yeah, that's what I would say.
I definitely echo what Monica said, specifically around taking the time to develop the community outside of like the municipalities and like the inside outside, really like be outside, right? And focus with your outside folks. And I think something that really continues to come up as like one of our ways of working that we use is like it's surrounded around urgency. And something that we know is that when we work with the city has a different level of urgency of when they need to get things done and how they need to get it done and the deadlines, and like there's a contract that needs to be filled, right? Like, and so they move at a different sense of urgency. And so the importance of having the outside folks together, like the people in community together around what is our own urgency and what is our own priorities, because a lot of the times that's how stuff gets co-opted, right? It's like they're like, look at this urgent thing and there's like $1 million to it, and if you want that million you got to come right now and like you're like, do we go? Like, we're working on this thing. And so I think one of the lessons learned was really to take that time to build out what that priority and that urgency is for the community folks to prioritize, so that when we get into the rooms with municipal workers or regulators, we don't get like the rug taken out from under us because of their urgency and what they need to happen.
Oh, thank y'all. I think the last question, we heard a little bit about what y'all are working on currently, this $1 million that came and went. There's a study happening with the port. Can we just name explicitly what are the things y'all are working on now, or what's on the horizon?
Yeah, I don't mind starting off with REJC and some of the things that's going on there. Currently, we've taken the time to really do our internal work, right? So after we did all this work with the climate justice plan, the Just Providence framework, the plastic bag ban, all the things, right? Like we're moving at the speed of the city's urgencies. And we took the time to be like, we had to, if not, we would no longer exist. Like, we had to take the step back to be like, what are we doing? How are we doing this? Is this what we want to do? And it was like, yes, but not like this. And so it was a moment of pause for us where we talked about like, we don't feel well, right? Like where we ran a whole program in the middle of a pandemic, while so many other personal things were happening, and like that was the hard part when you talk about the building the relationships. There's so much happening. And dang, where was I going with that? Sorry, what was the question?
You were talking about the internal work that our EJC.
Okay. And so we took the time to really focus on our governance and focus on how we make decisions for ourselves, and like where is our priority, and where, like, and so it was a good like year and a half of that, and us figuring that out and taking the time to pause and do that. And it was hard because the urgency of the stuff that needs to happen kept coming down the pipeline, so we still had to keep doing things. So, but now we're on the other side of that, right? Like now we are at the place where we know how we're gonna move. We know how we want to move. We've been super creative. We are going to be tax designated as a workers directed nonprofit. And really to just make sure that folks in the space have the decision-making power and autonomy to do the work that we need to do. And then at the top of the year, we're gonna revamp our Green Justice Zones curriculum and start doing recruitment for both like facilitators and community cohort and municipal cohorts. I feel like that's where we are. That's like a piece of where we are right now.
Anything else we want to add?
I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just we are right in the midst, of the stuff around the comprehensive plan, and then the zoning ordinance comes out of that. It's been long-term work. We've been, the Sustainability Commission has kind of used the bully pulpit that we now have as being like a government commission, even though it's like a volunteer thing, and it's there to be this kind of like accountability mechanism for the city's sustainability work. And so we've been deeply engaged in that. I think we've won a lot of things that would have never even been on the agenda, so we really kind of like forced them onto the agenda, and got it where there's now an opening for the city to ban all polluting industries in all industrial and waterfront zones, which would be huge. It's not as like solid, like as we were saying earlier, with kind of like building it in, like the language that they settled on was like the city may prohibit, not will prohibit. But it opens the door for that. And then so that's on to the next fight of like when it comes to the zoning thing, making sure that it actually is a will prohibit. So we're like deep in that work and kind of seeing where it goes. And then there's ongoing kind of things with like facility by facility, like there's particular ones that we're still battling, but we're shifting the terrain of like what they're dealing with, and trying to like pass kind of more proactive policy stuff at both the like city and state level, that would give them a different set of things that get looked at when a facility comes up being like a new facility or an expansion or like that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more work to do around like how do we deal with all of the toxic shit that's there currently, and like how do we phase it out, and not just talk about like what's in the future, but like what's happening right now.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just add in that yeah, I'm no longer a member of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee, but in the work that I am doing as a facilitator of One Square World, we'll be supporting the Racial Environmental Justice Committee as the anchor organization for Rhode Island, as part of the Thriving Communities Network, to support building up capacity for environmental justice organizations to be present in all of the different arenas where folks need to be, like, are planning to be doing work. So like in the legal spaces, in the spaces around policy and organizing and administration. So I'll be supporting and leading on the outreach effort within Region 1. So that'll be, all of Region 1, so the 6 states in New England, and really looking to like bring together a lot of the lessons that we've learned in our inside outside strategy to support the work of building a larger table to bring together like regulators as well as other folks with funding and resources to really support the fights of our community organizations to do the work that needs to be done. I'll pass it to you, Monica.
Period. Right now, I'm continuing to raise my 4 children. Me and my husband are just, our youngest is 8, so we think we're just like, oh, look at this. This is so easy. Our oldest is 18 now, and so we're just like raising our babies, living in the port, and trying to do that. And actually, right now, one of the biggest things we're working on at the People's Port is part of these agreements that Julian had mentioned earlier with giving a 30-year lease extension to one of the major polluters is that they do a port master plan. And so right now we're really heavily involved in doing the port master plan, bringing folks to bringing community folks to the meeting so that they can get their like hopes and dreams and opinions there. And then me like always holding their feet to the damn fire and poking them and just cussing them out in little small ways. But I don't do it as much outwardly. Now I just like crack jokes at them and like just make fun of them to their face in a nice way. So that's what we're doing.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much for sharing this story with us. I'm personally so inspired. You are so fire, so amazing, so phenomenal. And it's beautiful to see that like so much work came from like one situation that the community was dealing with, and y'all have been holding it down for 10 years. Like that is like such a flex to be able to sustain this work for a decade. Pandemic, children, all the things, job changes, and y'all did it. And so again, just endless gratitude for you all coming together today to share this story with us and folks.